Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode, and another Tier 0 format, according to Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links Meta.com. For some reason, we're currently in another Tier 0 format. Now, granted, in the TCG, it seems that, well, in most formats, in all formats, the community has collectively agreed that around Tier 0 is 65% of the top cut. 65 to 60, okay? That is generally considered to be a Tier 0 format, right? Or a Tier 0 deck, right? So, Salamangreat has apparently become this. Now, I'm not to say that Salamangreat isn't a Tier 0 deck. It is by far the best deck to play in tournaments. This is not even close. And we can look at the top decks here. As you can see, Salamangreat is taking up 84 of the 147 top possible decks. That is 57% of top cut. Okay? Or just of the decks that have shown up in tournaments throughout this format, right? So, reasonable to say it is over half of the representation. So, all in all, there is merit to saying that this is more or less a Tier 0 format, and since this is a predictive tier list, as they always do, it is an argument to say that we might be going into a Tier 0 format. However, this has happened several times in the past with Duel Links meta, where it hasn't ever really reached the point of Tier 0 that a lot of other decks have, right? The most that we got was a 60% representation from Onomats in one tournament. And that was a Tier 0 format, right? And especially when you compare this to things like even Necros, which was one of the less dominant representations of a Tier 0 format, or a myriad of other decks like Spiral or Zodiac or what have you, where those decks took up nearly 90% of the top cut. It's hard to really say that this is Tier 0. And even looking back at other Duel Links decks, such as the biggest example that I have is 6 Sam, that one was way more so a Tier 0 format than something like this. While I don't say that Salamangreat isn't going to be Tier 0, I'm always skeptical. So I kind of wanted to make this video to see what you guys have to say about this. Is Salamangreat Tier 0? Obviously, this isn't specifically for the ladder. This is more so for the tournaments, right? This is for tournaments. Now, if we go to power ranking, this is for the tournament topping decks from all of the community tournaments. And as you can see, according to this stat, it is at 29.6 power level, which I believe normally Tier 1 is like 15 to like 30, I think. I'm not entirely sure how they judge this. Obviously, Rose Dragon is on here as well, but you could just take Rose Dragon off and it's basically the same. So yeah, obviously Salamangreat is by far the sole Tier 1. I think that's not disputed. And that's not what I'm trying to say. Basically, what I'm trying to say is like, I think there are other decks that can compete, and I think that it's more of just like, one, shiny new toy, as was Onomats at the time, but two, I also believe that it's just a matter of time before more counters are found and more people are planning to beat this deck. And just like playing around how the deck functions and the like. And I'm not saying that it won't be Tier 0. There is a high possibility, dear Lanta, of it becoming a Tier 0 deck. 60% of representation is very likely. But let's take a look at some of the tournaments. I've obviously already talked about how it's taking up 85% of the decks that we've seen thus far since the release of the deck. So all in all, it's not insane to argue that it could be Tier 0. But again, that's 57%. Normally, we're talking about a solid 60 to 65%, whereas 57 is not quite that. Anyway, so let's look at some of these top decks. Here we have a daily tournament, the Quantum Dailies. This has been going on for a really long time. Shoutouts to, I don't know who does this, but shout out to this community. Honestly, the Duel Links community is crazy. They go hard. The amount of tournaments that they're constantly doing would just baffle the Master Duel meta people. So yeah. we can see 59 players, single elimination with a side deck and a best of 3. So again, this is mostly inside deck formats. As you can see, Salamangreat, and then we have Necros for some reason, which honestly, Valkyras, I don't know why you're here at 2, but alas, there you are. We have another Salamangreat, and then we have Heroes. So these are decks that are kind of expected to be seen, given the fact that, you know, well, besides Necros, top deck, by far, and then a deck to counter it just because of the Broken Busted skill. And this is another thing that I really think is undercutting Salamangreat, unlike a lot of the other decks that have had absolutely broken skills to be paired with them, or they were just absolutely power crept. I don't really think that Salamangreat is power crept. Sure, it's really consistent, but the thing is, the skill isn't nearly as powerful. And while it can end on some pretty good interaction, it isn't crazy. We've definitely seen it more powerful. So it's hard for me to really say. Yeah. Anyway, so 2 out of the top 4 from that one. If we look at this one, we can see that this tournament had 101 participants with a side deck as well. This one was also single elimination, so instead of doing Swiss or anything like that, it's just a bracket all the way up. And as you can see, for the full breakdown, we have 34 Salamangreat, which I don't know what's going on with this metric here. It says that it's almost half. It's not, according to the numbers, but they also give, like, not the right amount of decks. I don't know what's going on here. But as you can see, again, not quite a tier 0 type of list. But things get more interesting when we actually look at the top 4 list. Salamangreat, 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 and, wait for it, Salamangreat. So, this is where things starts to get interesting. The top cut, or more specifically, the topping of the tournaments tends to always be Salamangreat, and even more so, Salamangreat mirror matches. This is where things get interesting, though. This is the the battle phase number 421, hosted by Duel Links Entertainment, and it is a massively popular tournament that is constantly going on. 113 players with actual rounds of Swiss into a top cut. So this should help to determine where the deck actually falls. And as you can see, while 46 players out of the 113 were on Salamangreat, there were quite a few others. And that does represent what was actually over here. 10 Salamangreat decks. Understandable, it is the best deck, followed by quite a lot of variety. So it doesn't seem like Salamangreat is necessarily pushing anything out of the meta. It feels like a lot of decks can compete, and as long as your strategy is coherent, you're able to do quite a bit, as you can see here. Even a former tier 1 deck like Rose Dragon that had his skill nerfed, as well as everything else just kind of gutted, is still able to compete. So, all in all, interesting. Let's look at the top decks. Obviously, Salamangreat ended up winning, with Salamangreat coming in second, and Spell of Roses, that is, Rose Dragon. Rose Dragon coming in third, as well as Hero, or third, fourth, as well as Hero. And then we can see TG, another Salamangreat. So far, within the top 8, we have seen out of the top 6, we have seen 3 Salamangreat. Here we have Master of Rites. I think this is Necros. That's most likely what this is. And then another Salamangreat. So, honestly, overall, out of the top 8, 4 of those being Salamangreat, yeah, that's understandable. We did see a mirror match of Salamangreat in the finals, but the top 4 had 2 other decks, most notable being the Rose Dragon. For some reason, that name eluded me. But yeah, as you can see, there is definitely counterplay there. There are definitely players who could beat this deck, and there are definitely decks that can compete. Okay, moving on, we have this tournament. First of all, it was 42 players, but the reason I'm including it is because it is the one that is hosted basically by the website, that being Meta Weeklies, and this one is the only one to have, first of all, a top 16, but second of all, a 60% or above representation for Salamangreat. Now, if you're a little bit more harsh on what makes a tier 0, you would say, no, this doesn't count. It's not that 65 or higher. But if you're someone like me who said 60, sure, this tournament this specific tournament had a tier 0 representation of Salamangreat. However, mind you, it's 42 players. And it's a top 16. That is very easy to have a widely skewed array. That is basically a local, like slightly bigger than a local, right? So it'd be like saying at a local tournament that whatever made top cut at your local tournament was tier 0, which could be literally anything. So not exactly the most like confidence boosting if you are saying that this is a tier 0 format, but let's look at what the actual top decks were. Salamangreat here. We have Red Eyes. All right, this immediately discredits everything else that comes below this. Odd Eyes, okay, and Salamangreat, and Dark Magician, and more Salamangreat, okay, and more Salamangreat, and more Odd Eyes. For some reason, I couldn't remember that. So, yeah, not exactly the most competitive tournament, but this is, you know, it had the representation. So you could argue, hey, all of these thus far have had Salamangreat winning the whole event. So it's obvious that Salamangreat is the best deck. Here we have another one, 62 players. Not bad for a weekly as well. And you can see Salamangreat and 2 Photons. Salamangreat and Photons. So in even representation in the top 4 of both Photon and Salamangreat. Sure, Salamangreat ended up taking it, but I mean, XYZ's Galaxy, you know? There you go. And then the last one that I want to look at here is another 116-player tournament, and this is where things get interesting. Because here we have Salamangreat being 54%, or 54 of the top, or of the total decks, while they are 16 of the top decks, which is an even half. That's even 50, right? With things like Burning Abyss, Galaxy Eyes, Hero, Odd Eyes, etc., taking up a wide array of various different spots. And then, of course, Salamangreat taking it, with Photon once again being at number 2. Then we have another Photon and another Salad. Okay, interesting. Another Salamangreat, and then we have this is Odd Eyes. You can tell by the skill. We have Storm Axis, which could be basically anything. I think this might be World Chalice. It probably is, given the fact that World Chalice was up here. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there were 2 different World Chalice decks in Top Cut. Yeah, so World Chalice, we have another Salad, and that's it for the top decks. So, again, 4, I think, what was it, 5? No, 4 of the top decks were Salad once again, so that's half of top 8. Interesting, right? So, going back to this. Tier 0. Is it tier 0? Is Salamangreat a tier 0 deck? That's what I want to ask you guys. To me, it's not quite there, and I understand that this is predictive, and I think that it could be, which is what makes this very interesting to me. It's not quite there, so this is, as a predictive tier list, I see that this could be a possibility. And so I don't blame them for saying that this is a tier 0, but when they've done this in the past, it wasn't even close to ever making it be a tier 0 format, and then they did it again and said, no, it will be tier 0. It's definitely a one deck and the counters to said deck format, but the thing is, even when we look at this, there are still a myriad of decks that can take on Salamangreat and still produce, as you could see here, right? Even if we look at this, there are a myriad of decks that are able to compete. Most notably things like Galaxy Photon and Odd Eyes. They seem to be doing the best. While Hero has insane representation, that's just like the second most represented deck overall. So it does make sense that it would get a lot of top cuts. So, I don't know. Just what do you guys think? This is just kind of an interesting topic, an interesting thing that I've noticed. Obviously, this is very different from the ladder. I think Salamangreat is very popular on the ladder, but I think a lot more people are able to just like counter the deck. And like Salamangreat can't side in cards against specific matchups and the like. So, yeah, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, I like us very much appreciated. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Yu-Gi-Oh!, then just be sure to subscribe. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.